can ask questions. We would hope that you would ask questions. The first is we want to take advantage of declining enrollment, and we want to eliminate a transition. Multiple transitions is not always healthy and the best practice for our students. And taking away that 9th grade transition, taking advantage of declining enrollment, the first priority is to merge 9th grade with Fairport High School. The second one is begin consolidating our buildings. So when we're done in 2026-27, we will begin consolidating Balmer Place, because we have to have kids out of the building before we can start moving people over to Minerva DeLand. We're still keeping Minerva DeLand. That's an important piece because, number one, if you go over there right now, and some of you live over there, it's busy, right? There's a swimming pool, there's a track, there's a performing arts auditorium. Right now the gymnasium is being used. My son was just dropped off for basketball practice. So there's things that we're using that facility for. But we can also use it for offices, district offices, as Balmer Place. We can also use it as a way to if the opportunity arises itself, is to bring a partner like BOCES in to use it as a rental or a lease property. The board has talked about pre-K, that's become a community interest as well. So there's multiple different things that we can use Minerva DeLand for. That's the second part, is consolidating our buildings. And the third part, again, of course, was making sure we're protecting our investment. You know, Aaron, how many square feet do we have? Round numbers, 1.2 million. Right? 1.2 million square feet, right? That's an investment, and we're obligated to make sure that we're taking a look at all the parts, making sure that it's safe, making sure that you know, there's efficient services. So that's part of Fairport 4 2020-22, the priorities. And you can see right here, it's going to take time. It just doesn't happen overnight. We voted in 2019, and we're still working on components of the 2019 project. And true to form, here we are in 2022, planning for the next Fairport Forward. Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate you being here. So again, at any point in time, if you have questions, this is your opportunity to ask questions. If you want more clarification, put a visual reference here. And I'm not going to share that video because, you know, we had Mr. Clark doing a great job tour. We talked a little bit about some of the things that we've done in the past to our facilities, some of the commitments that we've made. This, again, is part of this Board of Education's priority of making sure that we have a strategic plan for facilities. We want to be transparent. We want people to see this is, you know, what we're trying to do to upkeep our promise to our community. And I'm not going to go over that list, but that list pretty much says we have a commitment to facilities. We have an obligation to protect everybody's investment, because if you have productive, well-kept schools, that's beneficial for the entire school and community as well. We're not going to do another video. We just took a tour, right? But the one thing that we didn't talk a lot about was this little bump out. Now, we saw what was happening in the tech wing, right? In the music wing. But the technology bump out, to me, is pretty important for people to recognize. We get to maximize state aid on a technology addition. Mr. Stevens, want to talk a little about the technology?
Yep, so the state will, first they have a formula for calculating building aid for schools, and it's based on building aid units. They look at our enrollment, the number of spaces and classrooms we have. The one special piece that they will aid is they'll aid an addition if it's related to STEAM, science, tech, engineering, arts, and math. They will not simply just aid an additional classroom. So that's, you know, kind of helps with our approach and our strategy of looking at what space do we have that really could use improvements, and how can we maximize the building aid as a whole as a school district. So they'll aid a portion of that addition that you see here on the screen in red, in order for us to try to maximize that aid. You know, as we're bringing Minerva DeLand students over, you know, we're working with the state in terms of trying to maximize each piece of aid that we're able to capitalize on in this building.
Want to talk a little about this tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the library, we were talking just about the additional pickup of classrooms that we need. You'll see that there is actually, and it's kind of hard to see with the lines there, there's actually 5 classrooms there, and the square footage is substantial. Two of the makerspace areas are over 2,000 square feet, and then some of the smaller areas are more in line with like a traditional classroom. One of the things that I had mentioned in the library was the general proximity of the labs in that space, and then the current where the NASA hunch class is, for example. So where his Mr. Provenzano's pointer was on the second floor is where the NASA class is, and by putting those things in a general proximity, that our science students would have access to makerspace just by simply crossing a courtyard. The same conversation I had with our architecture students and our digital photography students sharing that same space right now that they currently share in the library. They would be able to share that classroom space, be designed, and the utilization. I think Mr. Provenzano had shared when we were back in the auto and the woodshop space, our current classrooms, because they're not designed to be flexible, are only utilized. Our auto class, for example, is used 5 periods a day. So 4 periods of the day, we're unable to use that space because it's not designed for anything else. In the current vision of this, in the maker space down in the area, we would be able to hold on to components of our auto program in terms of the introductory classes, and still also have space for robotics, electronics, design and engineering, and things like that. So the idea is to create more flexible spaces so that I can use the rooms interchangeably, and the rooms are utilized throughout the day and benefit more students. And that's important because, as we haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, but when Mr. Provenzano was talking about bringing ninth graders up and less transition, part of the reason is also to have them be able to access the programming that exists at Fairport High School. Right now, the programming at Minerva DeLand is limited because it's a 1-grade building. We're not our students in ninth grade aren't able to access some of our programming, and we anticipate with ninth graders, especially ninth graders that don't love traditional school, will have access to more technology classes, access to more music classes, access to more art classes, things like that, where our students that struggle in traditional school settings really flourish. And so that gives us a little bit of an earlier starting point.
If there's specific questions, by all means, this time is for you to ask those questions. Yes, sir.
So, considering there was like a capital project a few years back, and you had mentioned it in other schools, so this goes for 15 years to pay it back. Is there plans for more capital improvement projects after this one?
So again, I really appreciate that question. One of the things that we learned right off the bat is that people think that all of our schools need this type of care and upgrades, and making sure that we're creating safe and modern spaces in all of our buildings. Yes, to your question, the Board of Education has a facilities plan that they charged me to create multi-year facility plan. You see, we've been talking about 2022, but if you look at this continuum right here, you'll see 2025. And within 2025, if you begin with the end in mind, we're focusing on our elementary schools. There's many upgrades and updates that we need to do to those facilities. The district office move needs to begin in 2025, but we won't. But when it's all said and done in 2030, the pool addition. I saw some of you people stuck your head in the pool. Right, that pool is an original structure, and that pool by the grace and the talent of our amazing buildings and grounds crew, they are constantly servicing that pool. Now, the pool people are not happy. They want that to be taken care of in this project. But if you take a look at where we're going to be for this project, and where we anticipate a pool in the future, we don't want to go back and redo it. So we're phasing it very strategically. Okay, so yes, by all means, if we wanted to get it all done in one shot, I think the number was about $200 million, right? But if we phase it in over time, debt comes off, bring in new debt, and it sort of minimizes that tax impact. It gives us an opportunity to save money to offset some of the costs. So that's why you do it in this fashion of phase 3, Fairport Forward 2020-25. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. So basically saying there might be more projects coming, so then they're going to be more. You said some of the debts rolled off, but this one the taxes are going up because the debt's not rolling off. So is that going to be the case for future projects?
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, so we look at our debt schedule anytime we're doing project development to see if we can try to line it up. I mean, in theory, we can always try to perfectly line it up. However, when we go through a project, we have to try to project out 3 years almost from vote date in terms of when that debt starts to hit the budget. So you have to get started early on the development in order to hit something that's going to be 5 years out from now. So to answer your question, I guess simply we try to certainly line it up. There is some debt dropping off in some future years that, if we can try to allow this project to line up, I think it's either 29 or 30 when we have debt dropping off. That's our hope when we get to any future project as a whole. So, and then trying also to utilize any, as Mr. Provenzano mentioned, and saving up some funds. We have a capital building reserve that's been established and approved by voters. So anything that we're able to do at year end with any surplus funds of the revenues over expenses to help bring that borrowing down, like we are for this project of, with the little over $19 million to bring that borrowing down. So we did that with the 19 project. I believe we assigned around $7 million for that one to bring that down as well. So anything we can do to try to cover those non-aided portions by the state, or at least try to bring those down a little bit to reduce the impact on the taxes, it's always our goal.
And that's why we phase it, because you can't do every single building. Every building doesn't get the same aid benefit. So sometimes it takes a couple of years for a building to get the aid. So that's part of the phasing. Did you want to talk a little bit about the finances from this sheet, or do you think, again, just to give fairness, because I know that there's some people that are interested in, the fiscals of it, and we said it in that large group, but I think it deserves its own slide here.
Yep, sure. So if you have questions, jump in. I'll just kind of go over this a little bit. I talked, in about 5 minutes in the library about this, but you can see here the total project referendum of $62.25 million. Then our capital building reserve usage. This is money that is in a capital building reserve or reserves that have been established, approved by voters. Then they're able to be funded at year end with budgetary surplus or even assigned monies within the budget. But we utilize surplus to fund these reserves. That money is right in, as you go to the polls and if you look at the proposition, you'll see that's listed right in there. So it says to be funded by $19.2 million coming out of reserves. You'll see it actually in 3 different dollar amounts because it's 3 separate reserves. So they add up to the 19.2. If you're here listening, you can know that. You'll see $3 amounts that add up to that 19.2. So that brings the principal payment, the principal borrowing down to $43 million. We don't borrow that for a couple of years because we have to go through a timeline of submitting it to the state education department. If it's approved by voters, we have to wait for their approval. And then when it comes back, then we go out for bid, and then we look to begin construction. By the time that takes place, we're really looking at hopefully not starting the initial borrowing until July of 20. Let me see, what year are we in now? We're in 22, July of 24. So then that first debt doesn't hit the tax levy until the 25-26 budget year. Then add on interest. So interest expense is part of the 15-year borrowing. Our debt service of $55.5 million. Like I mentioned before, the state building aid is $39.8 million. That comes back over the course of 15 years, which reduces the component share or our local share after the aid down to $15.7 million, or about $1,045,000 per year, which is $59 a year for a $200,000 home. So that's how that translates. You'll see the increase happen the first year that debt comes on, and then it stays for the year. So you won't see an increase every single year. It just stays on until it falls off in year 16. Is that any questions on that? How
much of that is the total project, the $62 million, right? So a lot of it's where you're focusing on the facilities of the high school itself, the building. But part of the project is the athletic fields. About what proportion of the project is the athletic facilities in the non-high school part?
Can you go to the high school slide? So right here, this here is a breakdown of the high school construction portion. So in any capital project, there's construction, then there's going to be contingency budget, and then there's incidentals. Incidentals are like our architect, engineering, legal, insurance, construction management type fees that come along with the project. So this is the construction portion of the high school. So the site work, that site work would include the tennis courts, parking areas, the site work to the back to where the addition will be, our track. So those are the big pieces that add up for all that site work right here at the high school. So that's strictly the high school piece there. Yep, good question. Then here are renovations. So the renovations we talked about about 17.35 million, and then the addition piece is the 8.9.
Mr. Provenzano, can you just talk about those real quick? We didn't have a chance to really say why we needed to do that stuff. Yeah, just with our newer
Absolutely,
people
yeah,
for
yeah.
tonight.
I'm looking for the rendering of that. I'm not.
So while he's looking real quick, I just talk about that. One of the issues, for example, with our track, if you had students that participated in it, our track is not suitable for Section 5 large scale meets, because it's only a 6-lane track. And unfortunately, when it was designed, it doesn't have a viewing area as well for families. And so a significant number of our students, in terms of their seasons, they can't participate, for example, in large scale invitationals or sectionals in our building. So they haven't had that opportunity for many, many years. So did you find that picture? Oh, you can't do that. And the same is true of the tennis courts. We currently have, I believe, 5 tennis courts. And in order to hold a sectional competition or a large scale, tournament, we need 7 courts. And so those facilities have been deficient for quite some time. And this is an opportunity to modernize those facilities, repurpose the current tennis courts for much needed parking that we need. And also we haven't talked about this a lot, but in the area between the two fields, the track and the current turf field, is accessible parking for our handicap. And to bring that closer to our area, that's something that our community, I think, throughout the fall and spring, we see. We constantly have carts going back and forth to have our families be able to access those events. So you'll see there's new stands around the track and a more functional field. The field that currently exists in the back where the track is right now, where Mr. Provenzano is pointing, is not large enough to hold events. And so that creates more serviceable space for PE classes as well as our athletic programs.
And
yeah, anything but a dual, right. That's okay. And in order to watch, they have to kind of just stand off to the side because there's no elevated stands in that area.
and then I'm not sure if we talked much about the tennis courts either, but where the tennis courts are, you point where they are right now. Yep. So the tennis courts are right where Mr. Provenzano is pointing right now. In order for us to pick up additional parking for our staff coming over from Minerva to Land, we have a spot slated, and we've talked about this really long range, out in between the current stadium field and the new multi-use field to house 7 tennis courts. Right now we have 5 tennis courts, and Mr. Clark will probably say it better than I can, but in essence, very similar concept to the track in terms of what types of events we're able to host. So having 5 tennis courts, bumping that up to 7 is a big deal. And Bob, you can talk a little bit more about that if you know more.
I think it's just I think people have a perception of what Fairport is or isn't, and that's a big surprise to know that one of the largest schools in Monroe County can't host a typical competition that takes place in most school districts all the time. So our student athletes, we addressed some of the issues with our baseball and softball field on that multi-purpose field in the back corner in this current project. As many people, obviously residents in Fairport, know, like, our property declines. I'm not sure exactly what the drop in elevation is, but all of the water issues that we've had for many, many, many years there, many of our student athletes in the spring have not been able to have home games or competitions, or they play truncated seasons where they pack the games in because of the conditions back there. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to have all of our home games for the first time in a long time this spring. But that addresses some of those issues as well.
So in addition to the technology or STEAM bumps, the art and music, the library learning spaces, we're looking forward to the opportunity of providing these opportunities for our students, our student athletes and their families. And I think that was something that if you talk to any of our students, they speak with so much energy and so much passion, whether it's the cafeteria and the new learning environments that are created there to what's happening outside behind Fairport. And they're excited about the prospects of being able to, be a part of, their experiences here right at our school. Any other questions? Thank you. We really appreciate you coming out and taking the time on your Monday evening to learn more about Fairport for 2020-22. Remember, vote on December 13th at Joanna Perrin Middle School from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Drive safely. Thank you.